So just to get things started, you started many companies. So my first question to you is, how did all of this kind of start?
That's a crazy story. I don't even know. I think I'm still trying to figure that out. I think, I was born in New York City to two immigrant parents. Both of them work for themselves. And so I think that probably instilled in me this idea of working for yourself, and so then therefore I always wanted to start a business, but I never knew what a business meant. I never had any experience in a business aside from side jobs. And so I didn't really understand it. And I got obsessed with the early internet a million years ago. And then that led me to an early startup in New York City, early days of the commercial internet. And then that got me hooked of this idea of creating something from nothing. I think both my parents were, created things. My mom was a dressmaker. My dad was a builder. And so like they created things, I could physically see them manifest something. And once I understood like how I could take technology and manifest something, then the ideas for companies kind of came out more from a product standpoint than from a company creation standpoint.
So just give me an idea of the size of your current business, Drift.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Drift is now 5 years old. We are 400 employees across Boston, San Francisco, Tampa, and Seattle. And we've gone from like 20 people in the first 2 years to now 400. And I think we'll probably be somewhere in the 600 plus range in the next 12 months.
I remember the first time I heard about your business many years ago, it was mostly a live chat bot. Mm-hmm. And now it evolved into an entire enterprise platform. So yes, especially for product people, yeah. Can you tell us a little more about your product?
Sure. So for us, we basically had an idea that in the beginning that the whole way that companies market and sell, specifically to other business, also to consumers, had to change. I'd spent my career building marketing sales software before this company called Performable, which then led to HubSpot, which we can talk about later if you want. But so I had spent a lot of time in marketing and sales, but we thought the whole paradigm had shifted from one where the company ran everything to one where the buyer had all the power. And then we said, so that was the aha. And then the next step was like, okay, if we were to reimagine all of sales and marketing software, think everything from Salesforce to everything else you can think of, how would they change in this buyer-centric world, right? Because Salesforce was created over 20 years ago now. So like if you were to reinvent it 20 years later, what would it look like? What are the technologies? What are the paradigm shifts? And then do it from a buyer-centric view. So the first thing that we did was like, well, if we think about the website, if you think about in your head like a store, and you want to go in and buy something that is a difficult item to buy, a highly considered purchase, what's the first thing you want to do? You want to ask some questions. You might want to talk to somebody. But if we looked at all the business websites in the world, none of them allowed you to talk to anyone on the sales side. People were using chat for support, but no one from a selling side. And so our aha was like, hey, instead of collecting leads, instead of doing all the things that businesses do, why don't we actually talk to the people who are most interested, because those are the ones who happen to come to our website, especially the more esoteric an item I sell, like in a large enterprise companies, the less likely it is that, my daughter or some random person is just going to be visiting your website. Those are qualified people. Why don't you talk to them? And so that was the aha. And we started with messaging chat on the website, and then that's expanded. Our notion has always been something much bigger, but from a product standpoint, you have to start with a wedge, and you have to start, and our wedge was chat. And then you have to start also thinking about what are the undeniable trends that you could build upon. And our undeniable trend was that everyone default messaging now, and it was now normal. And so we could use it for sales finally.
One trend we've seen in a lot of tech companies is that the CEO comes from a product background. They are also builders. They feel the pain before they do it. And they've usually done it at different companies, maybe in a different capacity. So what's your take on all of this? Because I think this is different from what other CEO backgrounds used to have in the past. We would see maybe more engineers or marketers.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think the world has changed, and this is the way that the world is going. And because now the only things we think that people want to buy are things that are an amazing experience and or deliver you some amazing outcome, right? Like everything else is like commoditized and easy to buy. And so in that world, you really need someone who comes and thinks about it really from a product-centric view of like thinking about not only the product in terms of software, but thinking about the entire experience as the product. That's how we think about it, right? It's like the marketing is the product, the support is the product, the service is a product, obviously the software is a product, but like all those things, even the way that if you were, none of us go to offices anymore, but if you were to come into our office and the way you would experience that is part of the product, right? All of that is the product. And I think that's the way the world is going. You know, I didn't have any role models really growing up for a whole bunch of reasons. And you know, I definitely, when I tried to turn to books for role models in the era I grew up, like you just said, those were finance people. Those were, you know, those are books about Jack Welch and people that I had no connection to. And I never thought I could be a CEO because those were the role models. They were not product-based role models. I was an engineer. I never saw an engineer kind of role model. Now I know that there were some, obviously Andy Grove and many others, but like, I had never seen them because, you know, again, I was growing up before the internet, so you couldn't find these people.
I'm a big believer in lifelong learning, as you said. Also didn't grow up with having a lot of role models. I also have a technical background and I was trying to kind of learn on the go. So for yourself, how do you continue learning and growing as a leader?
Yeah, I think, you know, in now that I can look back, I think my one obsession throughout my whole life has been this obsession around learning. Right, where from a little kid to it hasn't ended. So like I'm a lifelong learner. I'm obsessive about learning, but it doesn't have to be technology. It could be about anything. So I have this kind of curiosity. So I've never had a problem learning, wanting to learn new things. I've been obsessed about learning new things. I think the way I've helped other people, both at Drift and outside of Drift, who have, you know, asked me who aspire to be a lifelong learner, to convince them to do it is by saying that, you know, most of the patterns that we need to figure out when it comes to building a product, leading a team, doing anything have already been figured out, right? You can read ancient Greek philosophy and understand how that applies to creating a team, right? It's like the direct connections of how it is, you know, how they talked about, you know, the motivations of humans. You see every single day in managing the team. So all these lessons have been figured out. So why bother learning through trial and error, i.e. pain, which is how I learned. Why not shortcut that? Why not save yourself time? If you want to hack, the only real hack or productivity hack that I've ever seen is to learn from other people's mistakes. Because then that is the real productivity hack. You can look at all the, you know, calendaring hacks and to-do hacks you want, but those are not true time-saving hacks, in my opinion. The only true time-saving hack is learn from a mentor, learn from a book, learn from someone else who's experienced the same thing in a similar context, and that will save you years of pain and misery, which I've gone through.
I'm also interested in your life outside of work. Is there any particular routine you do that you think has a positive impact on your work life?
Yeah, I'm constantly kind of testing and trying new routines to try to, you know, become this whatever fictional optimal self I think I can become at a time. And I think this has to do with lifelong learning. I think, you know, the one that has been the most consistent has been, for me, morning routines has been consistent for me. That's important for me, which is, you know, obviously reading, you know, spending time reflecting, doing things like that, spending time. I have kids, spending time with my kids. But like, you know, one that I've taken on more and more, especially as we've grown as a company, is to make deliberate time with myself to just do nothing and not think, not read a book, not, you know, do any activity aside from going for a hike or walking or doing something kind of like mindless like that. Because I think that is the space in between the things when you actually have the breakthroughs. You know, everyone talks about the shower, having ideas in the shower and having ideas on a walk or whatever. Those things do not create ideas, right? If you can spend all your life in a shower, it's not going to create ideas. It's all the things you do before that. And then you give yourself the time and space and permission to let those things ferment and for something to come out of that. And so I make more time. I'm kind of going the opposite way. I'm trying to find more and more time when I don't do anything, don't work. And the more I do that, I find the more things become clear for me, the things crystallize, and the more breakthroughs I'm having now, more than ever, more than when I was just running and being active all the time.
I think that's a really good point. Sometimes we forget that doing nothing is a choice, and that it's important to block time for self-care, however it works for you. So it's good to know.
Yeah, for most people to this call. Yeah, for all of us listening to this call, if you are listening to this, therefore, by definition, you have a very hard time making time for yourself. And so it seems like just doing nothing is easy. Actually, for anyone who's self-selected into this subset of people, doing nothing is probably one of the hardest things that you will do. And it is therefore a discipline that you have to work at, like everything else, in order to get better.
So, David, before starting Drift, you also started multiple companies. Your most recent one got acquired by HubSpot, then you became chief product officer there. So my question is, why are you doing this again? Like, why did you decide to?
Yeah, I've asked myself in the first, since I started Drift, which has now been 5 years, I've asked myself that weekly. Why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? Why am I doing this again? Especially in the first year and a half or 2 years, maybe, of the company, when we were looking for what we all think about as product market fit. I was really asking myself and my co-founder, Elias, who's our CTO, every day would just be like, why the hell did we do this? Why did we create another company? That was by far the hardest period, because, we were kind of, you don't know if you're making any progress. You don't know if things are going to go anywhere, and you're just working as hard as you can with no visible progress markers, no finish line, there's no grade that you get at the end of that. And so that was really hard. I always joke that, if you start one company, it's okay. You were naive. If you start two, it's questionable. If you start three or more, and I've started 5, certifiable, and there's something wrong with you. And so I fall definitely in the certifiable camp. I think, I've been, this is like a deep psychological question. I think, there is a need inside of me to prove to myself, probably to others, that I can do this thing again and again. Why people run races over and over, and why people do all the feats throughout, history, to prove to them, probably prove to some subset of people, even if it's fictional, that they can do something. And so I think I have that problem for sure.
Well, another thing that I personally admire about you is how you build community, and how your current company is much more than just a product. You give away a lot of things. I'm personally subscribed to your your Sunday newsletter.
Yeah.
So what's your take on giving value versus capturing part of that value?
Yeah, I think, there's a whole bunch of things, a whole bunch of reasons that I personally do that, and why it's important to us as a company. I think on one end, I mentioned, as you did, that I didn't have any role model, I didn't have any real people that I could look up to, and I didn't have any books that talked about the kind of problems that I cared about when I was growing up, and I didn't have the internet, I didn't have all these things. And so I had been spending my life searching for these answers and for this help. And now that I'm in a position to having done this a few times, and maybe being able to learn and share, help people learn and share my failures, so that saves them some time. And so I think that's my motivation of like, hey, maybe I can share some of this stuff. Most of it, no one will listen to, even if they are actively listening to it. They won't truly feel it, and they'll have to fail on their own. But there'll be some small percentage of people that maybe I saved them some time by sharing some of this stuff. And I wish someone would have done that for me. And so that's part of it. The next part of it is, as I said, we believe that the world has shifted from a company-centered paradigm to a buyer-centric paradigm. And in that world where all information is free, we believe that the best marketing comes from your customers. The second best marketing comes from you being able to give to people, and never asking them for anything, right? Never having an ask at the end. And if you give enough, I believe that comes back to you, right? Back to ancient lessons that we can read in history. You give, and give, and you will get in return. And I believe in that. And we have been a benefit of that at Drift, that we have given and given and given, never asking. And, you know, even if someone, you know, might be a great customer for us, you know, 3 years ago, we would have never asked them that. And maybe now, 3 years later, they've come on their own because they've gotten so much value from the stuff that we've given to them without ever asking them for anything. And I think that's the way the world is going. And I think that's a good thing for the world.
So I also saw that you wrote a book called Hypergrowth, and you have a conference series with the same name.
Yeah.
So marketing and product tend to overlap a lot.
Yeah.
I'm sure that in your product, you also see this type of user personas all the time. So what do you think is the appropriate place for those two teams or groups to overlap?
It's an interesting question, because I was, like you, an engineer. Then I became, you know, a product person in quotes, whatever that means, and have been known probably most of my career as a product person. Even though I was building marketing and sales software throughout that whole time, I was not a marketer. I didn't know anything about marketing. And in starting Drift, I kind of dove deep and became obsessive around learning marketing. And then now that I have done that, you know, a lot of people say that I'm a great marketer, or I'm a good marketer, or an okay marketer. I'm like, I don't know anything about marketing, but like, it's because what I figured out from an engineer's mindset was marketing, marketing, the way that people talked about it didn't make any sense to me, coming with this engineer product mindset, until I reduced it back to the human element and understood and started to study, you know, cognitive biases, social psychology, human decision-making, and once I started to understand and study that, and I spent a lot of time studying that, then everything and all these tactics and why they worked and why they didn't work, it was a light bulb moment for me. It was like, okay, now I understand what is happening. And the amazing thing is that if you study those topics, that applies as much to everything, leading teams and what have you, but it applies as much to product and building products, especially in today's world, as what we would consider marketing. I think those things are blending, and you see that with obviously growth marketers and other people. Like the lines between those things are going to blend, and I think the CMO and the CPO will become one thing over time as we move from a world of brand PR communication to demand generation. Now we're moving towards kind of revenue generation. In that world, the maker is controlling, you know, the marketing. And so I would tell everyone on this call to basically go study how people make decisions, and that will benefit you in running a team, forming a company, marketing to people, selling to people, whatever you want. That is the core nugget that I wish, again, part of why I want to share this is like, no one ever told me that. I had no idea. Once you understand cognitive biases, how we make decisions, and the different personality types and all that stuff, you can look at something as simple that we use every day, an Amazon product detail page, and understand why every one of those elements are there and what it is doing to our decision making, where you may look at that naturally from a product or design centric standpoint and say, this page is ugly, it's too busy, it's got a bunch of stuff, I don't really understand it. Once you understand it from a decision making standpoint, you understand how this page can influence decision making from all different personality types, and that is not a mistake.
I agree, and I love dissecting emails and websites, looking through a product eye to really see what they're trying to accomplish behind the scenes.
And when the ones that are successful, whether it's real products or offline brands or whatever it is, the ones that are really successful, study infomercials. I would study really old infomercials, you know, on cable TV years ago. If you start to study the way that they talk and the patterns and the way they reinforce things and the way they go into loops and stuff like that, then you understand what's happening from a human decision-making standpoint, whether or not you like the style of marketer. It's more dissecting and understanding it from a decision-making standpoint and how to create products.
Another thing that you did that I think was very popular on Medium was this article about why you never hire product managers. So I would love for you to elaborate a little bit more on that.
Yeah. Managers that we've hired ever since showed me that article all the time. You know, I think, and I got in a debate with a couple of people like men, the famous Silicon Valley legendary product guy and some other people about that product. And my point was that my point was that product management, if you just say those words, like don't really mean anything. They mean something within a context. Everything has a context. And so like when I was doing in the Silicon Valley, building social applications, yes, it's amazing to hire you. What you want to do is hire a product manager from, Twitter to work at LinkedIn, to work at Facebook, to work, to back and forth, like, because they bring in a context and they understand it. Once you zoom out of that context and you start talking about product managers and hiring a product manager that works on, at Boeing and engines, to build, a social app, there might be some overlap, obviously, in the way that they think, but it's not as simple as that. Those skills are not as transferable as that. It's almost like back in the day, they used to, there was a product manager, there's a program manager, right? There's a project manager, and there's a product marketer, and all these things, if you go into any given organization, would, especially large organizations, mean something wildly different, right? Like, and so like, my point was like, forget the titles and look more at the basic skills that you are looking for, right? What are the intrinsic qualities that you're looking for in someone? And the words product manager are kind of meaningless, especially for us at the time when I wrote that, right? We're a Boston-based company. And so like someone from biotech coming to work, on a conversational marketing product, or vice versa, or coming from a bank, a finance thing to come over, even though, yes, they are a product manager, hard to translate those skills. Or even if they do, you're not going to get, this amazing 10x result because they were a product manager in the past. So anyway, sorry for the convoluted explanation, but that's kind of where I came in from. Product manager's not a fungible title.
And that's exactly what I'm trying to solve with my company. And I became a product manager without going to a product school. And I wanted to help others know that this is an alternative, and that nobody's really explaining the difference between one thing and the other. So another thing that is
and in some ways, depending on what you build, depending on what you build, like one of the best things you can do is bring someone from that domain or who was that persona and have them be on the product team. That's what I did at HubSpot. We took a lot of people who run the marketing team or maybe the services team, and over time, we could afford to school them or educate them on becoming a project. They were some of our best ones because they understood the problem deeply and they had the empathy, and the empathy was a hard thing to teach, right? Not the skills.
I completely agree with you. And I believe that in order to be a good manager, you need to have some experience on the ground. This is not something that you can just do right off the bat.
No.
Another thing that is very popular in Silicon Valley is this motto of do things that don't scale. And I think this is especially true at the very beginning of startups. But I'm also curious about you. Is there anything that you're still doing yourself that that doesn't scale, but it's so core to your business or to your values that you still want to do?
Yeah, I'd say I laugh because inside of Drift, I would be infamous for saying do the things that don't scale, and that the key to scaling was to do the things that don't scale. We actually wrote a book that you can download on our website or you can get on Amazon, but it's free on our website, which is called do the things that don't scale, right? And it's like, I think it's 52 or 56 plays. It's broken into plays of things that we did from a marketing standpoint that were the things that don't scale, that were super successful for us and were keys for us to scale in the early days of the company. I do a lot of things that don't scale right now. I'm involved in me and my co-founder are involved in almost all recruiting at every level. So that doesn't scale by definition. I'm deeply involved in marketing, as I mentioned before, still down to like sweating, the design of something or the way that we wrote a particular sentence, or like, you can talk to my marketing team and product team. They'll tell you that they get many annotated images and videos that I send them about every little word, because I think those are the things that are easy to let go as you start getting bigger. And those are the things that really matter, right? Especially when it comes from a communication standpoint, that really tell the customer a story. And those are the first things that people are willing to cut corners on in order to, quote unquote, scale, right? And so my thing was always even with my managers, I was like, putting things for product managers, I would get, I would have conversations with them about like, you putting things in a spreadsheet or Asana or whatever system you want to use on behalf of the engineers is, even though that looks like a scalable thing, that's not actually that useful. You doing the things that don't scale, spending time with customers, getting on calls, doing support, all these things that seem like they don't scale as you get bigger. Those are where the truth is. The truth is not in some beautifully scalable database or spreadsheet that you're spending all your time doing this. The truth is outside of the building. The truth is with your customers. The truth is in your internal customers, which are usually for a product person, your sales, marketing, and services teams. That's where you'll find truth, not in spreadsheets.
I'm on a personal mission to burn down spreadsheets.
Yeah, good. I'll join you. Sign me up. I'm with you.
So, David, obviously, you have a very strong opinions on your own product. It's your
very strong.
Building products. At the same time, you hired a bunch of smart people to help you shape that vision. So, how do you create that balance between the influence that you want to have as the ultimate product person and also allowing others to create their own voice?
Yeah. Great question, because I come from a product background. Obviously, whoever is going to lead or the set of people that lead our products probably have the worst job you can imagine, right? And if you came from a sales background, the CEO comes from a sales background, the head of sales has the worst job, and et cetera, because you're always going to try to bring that perspective there. The way that, I think about, I try to operate more at like zoom in, zoom out levels, like super high level, I'm involved with some themes and where we think from a vision standpoint from a company. And then I'm not really involved in anything else, how things get made or like what our process is or, what our cycles or, do we have a date on something? Do we not have I don't have any opinion on anything kind of day to day. And then I zoom in at a very low level of the quality and the details and the way that we're expressing ourselves from a customer perspective. And that's where I'm involved. So I'm involved at those two levels. In my view, they're kind of more coming from the perspective of the customer. At the high level, it's really, all of our customers, kind of how would they view us from a vision standpoint and where we're going. And at the very low level, it's like, what is the actual tangible experience that they have? Everything in between on like where people spend all the time as product managers geeking out and thinking about, methodologies. And I don't really have an opinion on that. And so that's where I let those experts really shape that. I don't know anything about that, nor do I want to actually.
Well, and just to wrap this interview up, I want to ask you about the future. Where do you think are the biggest opportunities for product people?
Biggest opportunities for product people. I think, product is now something that is involved in, I can't think of a company that doesn't think about it. It's hard to think of a company or set of companies or industry that don't think in terms of product terms now, which is a massive shift in my lifetime, my professional lifetime. So that's good. So that means that huge opportunities for you to work across all domains. Like who would have thought product people would be working on everything from cars to energy to rockets to this to that, like to robotics to not me. I never thought that. And so so now you can, and software being a part of all that. So you from a software standpoint and product and hardware standpoint, you have all this ability to create these amazing things, including creating products that you can directly market, sell, and service to customers in the case of software, but also in the case of direct to consumer type products, right? Like, so the world is your oyster now. And so that's the big opportunity. And then the next opportunity is to really think about things from a buyer or customer centric view. And how do you remake not as what you think today about as your product, right? Whether it's like you think about this as your product, but think about the totality of the entire experience from everything. And we now, all the product people listening now have the benefit of having experienced, or at least having seen something like a Tesla, or experienced something like the Apple Store or Apple. Like many of us didn't experience anything like that, where the whole end-to-end chain is a product now. And that it would be my role model for the next type of product company that you would create is the entire thing has to be experienced. Service is not someone else's problem. Manufacturing is not someone else's problem. Selling is not, marketing is not. The totality of that is now the product. And so you have to think about everything, and it's exciting because you have more of a purview now of things that you can be involved in. Those are the product. How your customer experiences you as a company or you as an individual from that company is the product now. So it's exciting.
Well, it's been fantastic to learn from you during this interview. Is there anything else you would like to add?
No, check out Drift, or check out, I'm on all social media, so as D Cancel. And so just hit me up, ask a question, and check out some of the stuff that we're doing. And please teach me something so I don't learn through pain.